Hey everybody, so now we are going to talk about how to take our scorecard and really kind of squeeze it, distill it down into becoming an awesome scorecard. So this is all about strengthening our scorecard, and let's go ahead and get into it. So let's just make sure that we're all baselined, we're all seeing things the same way. This is the EOS scorecard structure. We have 5 to 15 measurables. We don't want more than 15 because it means that we got a lot of information, but it doesn't necessarily give us command of our scorecard. We want more than 5 because we need to have more than just kind of a singular view on things. We want to have a little bit of depth. And we're going to talk about how to get to that 5 to 15. That's the majority of our conversation today. Now, for every single one of these measurables, we want to have a clearly defined goal. What is it that we expect to be doing week in and week out? We want to know exactly who is responsible for each one of these measurables. These are the non-negotiables. This is the basics to an EOS scorecard. We have to have all 3 of these columns fully working for us. And then we're going to be able to see our performance over the course of 13 weeks. We want to see that performance over a quarter so that we can see if we're trending up and down or if we have some red because it's an anomaly, but it allows us to have that comparative view, which is so critical for us. And we know that the products of a great scorecard, what we're shooting for is we want clarity. We want to be able to be very clear about what it takes for the success or lack of success for our department or for our company. This is what's going to drive our focus and performance. We want to be able to be clear around numbers. We get to take away all that opinion and subjective perspective when we're looking at numbers. We don't have to say, hey, I think we did really well. Someone else goes, I don't think we did that well. And we then have arguments about it. We just say, hey, we were supposed to have 50 sales calls last week. How did we do? We had 54. Excellent. And then we basically get to drive forward. And we want to have accountability. When we know who is responsible for what, it does 2 things. It lets us all know who's watching this area, but just as importantly, it frees up each person to be able to apply their creative genius to figure out how to be able to really outperform and take things to the next level. So that's really what we're trying to get to here with the good key product. Now, I just want to kind of add a little bit of opinion on some of this here too, is we are in the data age, and data, and when you have clarity in your data, then you can automate what you want to do with that data. It is disrupting all sorts of businesses. You know, not that long ago when you would go through toll booths, you had people there taking money and counting the money, and no longer. It's all electronic, and security guards, you don't see those anymore because now everything's camera and AI and hotel check-in and delivery and reviewing bank loans and contracts. All of this stuff is moving over to data-centric ways of looking at things. And this is when we start to take a look at the future of all of our industries, there's no exceptions. It is being disrupted by the companies that know how to manage data more capably. So the thing I want to try to emphasize for everybody is data and the management and the understanding of this data is affecting all industries. It's affecting all departments. You can be the person that's disrupting, or you can be the one that's disrupted. But if you get good at data management, you're going to be on the disrupting side rather than getting disrupted. So, all right, so let's get into it. Where do we start? We got to make a great scorecard. Now, this is the part that takes a lot of people by surprise. Our starting point is actually the accountability chart. You see, if we have an accountability chart and we have a whole lot of different work and things that we have on here, like this example, we got a sales seat and it's got 15 different roles to it. We're going to have a crazy big scorecard. Every one of those would require 1 or 2 metrics. That'd be like 15 to 30 metrics just by itself. So where we want to be able to get to, the first place that we want to start is we want to make sure our accountability chart's clear with what each seat is responsible for. This is going to allow for an easier scorecard because when I have a concise view of what the seat's responsible for, I can have a concise view on what to measure. So our starting point, we start to think about this, is our accountability chart. Here's a simple example of a software as a service company. We have gotten clarity on each of the roles for each of these seats. But even in this type of structure where I've got 6 leadership team members, I got an integrator and a visionary, so I got 8 people. With everybody having kind of 4 to 8 metrics per department, it can lead to a scorecard that's pretty big. In this case, it's like 36 metrics, and that's still keeping it pretty tight per department. So, can we really get it down to 5 to 15 metrics? And And this is what we're going to try to go do, because I see these types of scorecards all the time. And there's a few things I want your eyes to be drawn to as we talk about why this is an issue. The first one is, when we take a look at this many metrics, if you just ask a simple question of, okay, what determines the success or failure of this business? It's really kind of hard to tell. Is this business healthy right now? It's kind of hard to tell. There's a lot of green, a lot of red. Are things going well or not going well? The second challenge is that in the EOS way of doing things, the scorecard tells us our most important things that we should be focused on week in and week out. And in this case, we have 36 things that we should pay attention to, and it's 15 red items. So right away, we're going to put 15 items onto the IDS list. This is before we even talk about rocks or any other issues that people want to talk about. We're never going to be able to IDS this much stuff. And so this is where we're just going to have to start getting used to red, because we're going to have so much red on our scorecard so frequently. It creates a big problem. It makes the scorecard far less effective. So here's what we're going to do. We're going to work through example. And our goal is to basically take this scorecard, which I think is a regular place, a starting place for a lot of organizations, whether it's across a company or whether it's in a department, tends to have a lot of metrics. We're gonna distill this down to a much smaller scorecard that's going to give us a far more power and clarity and accountability. So here's the first trick we're going to do. We're going to go take a look at this, and we're going to study something called funnel metrics. So we have on the scorecard, we had five different metrics in the marketing area. We had press mentions and social media posts, web visits and inbound leads and qualified leads. But if we take a look at those 5 metrics, they kind of lead in a progression. So hopefully I get press mentions. Maybe that contributes to my social media posts. Maybe I'm posting other stuff. But either way, both of those things are going to drive to web visits, which drive my web visits will convert to inbound leads. My inbound leads will convert to qualified leads. I've got kind of a funnel effect that's happening here. And the simple reality to it is that the person maybe in charge of leads, or maybe the person in charge of marketing, they need to be paying attention to all aspects of the funnel. But the entire team doesn't need to pay attention to all of this information. They only need a slice of it. And one of the things that these funnels, when we have these types of structures, create problems for us on is, let's say we're red on social media posts. Well, okay, we didn't get our social media posts, and now we don't have enough web visits, and now we don't have enough inbound leads, and now we don't have enough qualified leads. So it's really, we didn't do our social media posts, but it actually looks like it's 4 different problems when it was really 1. So when we have this type of funnel structure, it's putting a lot of redundancy and creates a lot of red when it's making, and adds some complexity, because it's sometimes hard to tell where's my root cause problem. And in this case, it was just social media posts. So again, the marketing department needs to pay attention to every detail in the funnel, but maybe not the entire leadership team needs to see this. So this is where we can start to break it down. And we gave a few different examples here. So like if I took sales, outbound calls leads to sales meetings, which lead to proposals, which lead to verbals, which leads to dollars in legal. That's great. But for the leadership team, we don't necessarily need to have all of these stages being shown. So here is where we may just drop it down and say, I just want to see the dollars in legal. That's, if I see that, that gives me a sense of our health. And that is a way to get rid of 4 out of the 5, 80% of the things that we've got here. And we can do this in other places. We just went through the marketing one. We could reduce all the different items in the funnel and break it just down to maybe qualified leads. If I did for development, we could say a number of stories completed that we're doing in our software development. That leads to the number of code refactors and how often we got to redo some of the code that we've done. Then that focuses on number of tests or number of releases. I might just drop this down to 2. Maybe I only need number of stories completed, number of code refactors, and so on. Now, this simple change of reducing some of the repetition of these funnels, in this case, would have actually reduced our scorecard by nearly 1/3. And more importantly, maybe not more importantly, but just as importantly, a lot of the red disappeared. So now the picture is becoming clearer. I don't have as much kind of redundant. The top of the funnel got red, so now all the rest of the funnel's red. So I got this big block of red there. Where do I even start to look at? Now, all of a sudden, by reducing this viewpoint, I can now start to basically pay attention to fewer things with greater focus. Now, there's one other byproduct that I do want to talk about with this, which is when we reduce the funnel metrics, we're reducing the amount of information that we're getting, right? Before we could take a look at it and say, okay, hey, sales, we're looking at these 5 steps in the funnel. Now I'm only seeing 1 step in the funnel. This is causing us to become more dependent on our leaders in those areas. It basically means we're going to have to listen to their judgment. And when something goes red, we're going to have a heightened sense of urgency to it. And what this is going to do is it's going to increase our reliance, our communications, hopefully our trust, and definitely our accountability on the person that's responsible for those domains. So if this mechanism of reduced visibility actually increases accountability for the leaders in the different areas. All right, so that's one trick. We're going to reduce those funnel metrics, get it really down to a much more streamlined point of view. Second thing is we're just going to remove some of this kind of FYI and distraction metrics. And here's a few examples. Maybe Jen, who's got responsibility for all the company's renewals, she wants everybody to know that, right now we got more renewals than normal. Instead of 1.5 million in renewals, we got $1.8 million in renewals. So she's going to be very busy. Or maybe the guy in charge of development wants to show the number of lines of code developed each week and shows everybody kind of, look at how many lines we now have. Wow, it's impressive. Or the finance person wants everybody to see the cash balance because everybody should be worried about cash. Okay. A lot of these things don't really need to be there. If finance is keeping an eye on the cash balance and the cash balance is a problem, we should just make it an issue. It doesn't need to be something that everybody knows the cash balance of the organization every single week, usually. So we look at these and we really ask the question is, are these driving operational performance? Are these really driving excellence? Or are they just kind of like FYI, we should know that we're at 21 million lines of code? If we don't feel that this is driving operational performance, then there's a good chance we don't need it. But if we're going to keep it, if we have to do this, my ask to everybody here is operationalize it a bit and just change the way you're doing it. So instead of like showing that, okay, we have $1.5 million in renewals, now then 1.7 million in renewals, and then $1.8 million in renewals, just show the incremental change. So, okay, we went from 1.5 to 1.7, it's up 200,000. Then it went up another 100,000, still up 100,000. Actually, that's probably a little bit off there. If I do lines of code, similar type situation, if I can start to say, instead of 21,550 to 21,500 to 21,550, to just show the incremental growth that occurred in that week, it gives me a finer way of understanding how we actually performed in a particular period of time. So this is where we're trying to get rid of these FYI metrics. If we are going to do it, let's operationalize it by not showing kind of the roll-up numbers, but we want to basically see the change numbers. Similarly, this is where I would say gut check again. This is almost like a funnel, but it's a little bit different. If I look at my clients in green, yellow, and red, and I color code my clients, and I can keep track of what percentage is in which bucket, and you can see that all were in red. I didn't have enough in green, I had a lot in yellow, and too much in red. Well, when I basically start to look as it goes across to the left here, there's a few things that really start to stand out. My clients in green has moved up. That's great news. My clients in yellow have dropped down. Oh, that could be good news, except they turned red. It is not good news. So this is where you look at it and go, do we really need to be tracking yellow, or do we just need to be tracking green and red? Or do we just need to be tracking red because we only want to pay attention to the ones that are in trouble? This is where we can start to streamline some of this information. And if we do that, if we got rid of the funnel stuff and then we remove the FY and distraction metrics, this is where we now have cut down our scorecard by 50%. These 2 steps of just kind of really what is key operationally for us all to see and pay attention to is much more effective in driving our attention to things. The other good news here is that we've now reduced the number of red items down to 6, and now we could IDS 6 items in a week. That's now all of a sudden we can really put this stuff on the front burner and make sure that we're really dealing with the most important things. Now, there's a third thing with the scorecards that you see quite a bit, and this is the concept of lumpy data. This is when we say lumpy data, this is kind of metrics or measurables that are not constant. They're basically up and then down and then up and then down. And a lot of times you see this in the sales area where your orders are just not coming in on a regular cadence every week. You have a big one, then some quiet time, then a big one, and some small ones. And when you look at this, it can be really hard to tell if the business is doing well or not. And so in this type of picture, a company went 14K, 0, 90,000, 120K. So is it above or below its goal of 38,000? So it makes it hard to understand that. Sometimes you'll say, okay, let's just use the year-to-date number, but that's actually not very helpful either, because like the example I've got here in the bullets, if I have a company go of $2 million in 2021, that's what we want to get, and we're at 428K on April 20th, does that mean we're doing good? Like, that's pretty hard. Like, what's that actually telling us? So this is where we got lumpy data. It can actually feel very confusing, hard to understand it. And so there's a couple of tools that we can use. The first one is we can just use the average column. If you're using any of the kind of EOS software tools like 90 and traction tools, even if you're using Google Sheets, you can set up an average column really easily. And this is a way that you can normalize that information so that it becomes more relevant to the way that you're looking at things. If you want to get a little more fancy, you can start to do a rolling average. So instead of taking the average for the entire period of time, we just take the average over the previous 4 weeks or 6 weeks or 8 weeks, and that's going to normalize the information. So if I have some ups and downs, no problem. I just create a trailing 4-week type of view, trailing 8-week type of view to basically create a more normalized view, which will allow me to see things like, okay, yeah, we're trending in the right direction right now because we had a couple good weeks. So this is a method that we can really start to make the scorecard more meaningful for us. Another little trick that we can do is we can use ratios. This one's relatively simple. Let's say I can say, all right, I want to pay attention to our win rate. Are we actually talking to our clients and winning the deals? Now, when I show here, hey, we won 4 deals last week, that's a great sign, unless we lost 40. If we won 4 and lost 40, that's not really that great. So this is where we can create a ratio. This is where we can say, okay, if I won 4 and I lost 4, perfect. My win rate is 50%. And this is where ratios can actually help us take kind of 2 data points and consolidate this down to a single data point. There's strengths and weaknesses with this type of approach, but that is a mechanism to start to reduce almost redundant type of information. And then the last piece I want to get back to is we want to reset with the accountability chart. We want to go back to that accountability chart and just go study it. So in this case, we could take a support position, number of open cases, the average open time, tier 1 escalations, tier 2 escalations, average rating. This is great. Does the leadership team need to know all of this? Probably not, but this isn't really a funnel. These are kind of some different things here, a little bit of funnelish, but we got different metrics. Doesn't really line up. And this is where we'd say, okay, so let's take a look at that accountability chart. Our support role is responsible for client support and best in class. And so if I take a look at that, maybe I just want to pay attention to the number of open cases and what our average rating is on the performance of what we're doing, because we want to pay attention to that best in class and whether we really are supporting our clients effectively. So, or supporting our clients, whether open case is a good measure of effectively, I guess that's made me cop a little bit more in the rating. But in either case, this is where we can take 5 metrics that seem to be a little bit disparate and now break it down to 2 that really ties up into a very simple view, kind of a more executive view of looking at things. And so when we put all those actions to streamline things down together, it took that scorecard of 36, it drops it down to 13 items on our scorecard. And just as importantly, we only have 3 items tied to ES. Our business looks like it's actually doing pretty healthy here. We just got a few areas that we got to focus on and get those things back to green as quickly as possible. In fact, as I'm looking at this, the fact that weekly revenue has been down every single week, it already bugs me. It even creates a sense of anxiety for me. Even though I know this is a fictional scorecard, it still bothers me. And that's what we want this to do for everybody in our organization. So here's our summary. We want to reduce those funnel metrics. Number 2, we want to remove the FYI and distraction metrics. We want to normalize any of that lumpy, volatile type data and make that become more normal so that we can process it mentally easier. We want to use ratios to start to streamline things a little bit. And then we're going to go back to those accountability charts and make sure that the accountability chart is being reflected in that scorecard. And if it's not, something's got to give, either the accountability chart or the scorecard. This power of a metric, this is like when we talk about this type of thing, I know that we're in the details. I know it feels like a grind, and I really want to encourage you to do it because the power of a metric is so big. And I love this story because it's about the 4-minute mile. Because if you don't know about this, the 4-minute mile was deemed impossible to run for, and nobody did it for hundreds of years. And we know that people were doing races in the 1700s, 1600s. Nobody could beat that 4-minute mile. And it was somewhat debated that there were scientific justifications. So there are these scientific charts that show this. How prevalent it was, I'm not sure. But the idea to it was that it is impossible for a human being to run a mile in less than 4 years. But in 1954, all this changed. It happened when Roger Bannister ran a mile in Oxford in the UK in 3 minutes, 59 seconds. But this is where this metric, right? Okay, this is great. We broke the record. World records break. This is what happens as time goes by. But this is where the power of a metric really drives forward. And this, I just kind of want to remind on the original scorecard video, something that Lord Kelvin, another UK guy, put out there. If you cannot measure it, you cannot improve it, which would infer that if you can measure it, you can improve it. And that's exactly what happened, because in 1954, when this all changed, the record was broken again just 46 days later. Not able to be broken for hundreds of years. And then all of a sudden, it actually gets broken within 2 months. And then it gets broken in 1957 and 58 and 62 and 64 and 65. It's been broken 18 times. In 1964, after it was deemed impossible, we got high schoolers breaking the record. Then we have old people like me breaking the record, people over 40. We got 2 miles being run in under 8 minutes. And now today, nearly 1,500 people have actually run 4-minute miles. This is what the power of a metric gives us. It allows us to change perspective. It allows us to set a goal for ourselves that we can strive at and we can start to perform and improve. It allows us to predict our business and be able to allow for us to be able to perform in a very steady and consistent situation in a world where steadiness and consistency is very hard to achieve. This is what our scorecard does. And this is why it's so important that we actually spend the time to grind through this and build great scorecards. So please use the scorecard to drive focus and excellence in your organization. And if you have any questions, you want to talk about this, you want me to review your scorecard, I'm happy to do it. My email is rick@outpaceenterprises.com. I would love to talk to you about it. Thank you, everybody.